In a peaceful African village nestled between the fertile lands of the savannah and a dense forest, the people lived in harmony with nature. The air was thick with the scent of earth and the song of birds, a melody that accompanied the village's daily rhythms. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the land, the village came alive in preparation for the harvest festival. It was a time to celebrate the fruits of their labor and honor the spirits of their ancestors. The people gathered in the heart of the village, dancing around the fire, singing songs passed down through generations, and offering thanks for the bounty of the earth. But amidst the joyous celebration, there was one young girl who stood apart from the festivities, Kamida. At just 12 years old, she had seen more hardship than most would in a lifetime. The loss of her mother had left a wound that never quite healed, and her heart was heavy with memories of the woman who had given her life. Kamida missed her mother's warmth, her laughter, and the comfort of knowing she was loved unconditionally. Since her mother's passing, Kamida had been forced to endure the cold indifference of her father, Salwa, and the cruel treatment of her stepmother, Basa. Basa had entered Kamida's life like a storm, her bitterness and jealousy easily taking root. She married Salwa soon after Kamida's mother's death, and ever since, Kamida had felt like an outsider in her own home. Where there was once warmth and care, there was now a cold distance. Basa showered her own children with affection and praise, while Kamida was left to fend for herself, often treated like little more than a servant. The young girl's heart ached as she watched her father smile at Basa, never noticing how the woman's treatment of Kamida chipped away at her spirit. The village festival, a celebration of joy and togetherness, only seemed to highlight how alone Kamida felt. As the villagers danced and sang, Kamida watched from the sidelines, her eyes fixed on the fire that crackled in the center of the gathering. The flames danced in the dark, and for a moment she imagined they were carrying her thoughts up to the sky, to her mother. She longed for her mother's comforting presence, for the gentle hand that had once held hers. But her mother was gone, and Kamida was left to navigate this world without her. Salwa, her father, was there, standing beside Basa and their children, laughing and enjoying the festivities. Yet there was a hollowness in his eyes when he glanced at Kamida. He had become distant ever since his remarriage, torn between the woman he had chosen and the daughter he had once adored. Kamida couldn't help but feel the sting of his indifference. He had grown used to Basa's ways, and Kamida's struggles seemed to no longer matter to him. In the midst of the joyful noise and the warmth of the fire, Kamida felt a sharp loneliness settle in her chest. The celebrations around her were a world she no longer belonged to, a world where she was invisible, overshadowed by her stepmother's cruelty and the silent distance of her father. The weight of her mother's death, combined with her sense of alienation, made the festival feel more like a reminder of everything she had lost than a celebration of what was to come. Kamida's life at home had become a daily cycle of chores and silent suffering. Each morning, as the sun rose and painted the sky with shades of gold, Kamida was already awake, sweeping the floor, collecting water from the well, and tending to the animals. She did all the hard work, the tasks that required time and effort, while Basa lounged around the house, overseeing the work with a distant, uninterested gaze. Kamida's kindness and willingness to help were often taken advantage of, and she soon realized that the more she gave, the less she received in return. Basa's children, younger and more pampered, spent their days playing and laughing while Kamida's hands grew rough and tired from the never-ending tasks. She was invisible in her own home, a shadow that moved through the walls without anyone truly noticing her. It was hard to ignore how different the treatment was. Basa praised her own children for even the smallest of tasks, rewarding them with smiles and affection. But when Kamida did something good, when she finished her chores or helped around the house, there was no recognition, only more demands and complaints. The young girl's heart began to ache with the weight of it all, and she often found herself wondering what she had done to deserve this cruelty. Her father, Salwa, was too caught up in his work to notice the strain on his daughter. He spent long hours in the fields, coming home tired and distracted. When he did return, Basa was always there, ready to greet him with a smile and a meal, as if everything in their home was perfect. Kamida would sit at the dinner table, barely speaking, watching as her father doted on his new wife, oblivious to how she was being treated. There were moments when Kamida would try to catch his attention, moments when she wished he could see the pain in her eyes. But each time she tried, his gaze would pass over her, and the emptiness in his heart was clear. Basa, on the other hand, was keenly aware of her stepdaughter's struggles, but instead of offering kindness or support, she used them to her advantage. Kamida's kindness was a weakness in Basa's eyes, and she saw it as a tool to further bend Kamida to her will. It was a slow, methodical cruelty, one that chipped away at Kamida's spirit with each passing day. The more Kamida did, the more Basa demanded. Her father, too, was complicit in this, either too indifferent or too afraid to challenge his wife's authority. It was as if Kamida was nothing more than a servant in her own home, and she had begun to feel like that, nothing more than an invisible servant whose presence barely mattered. Basa's jealousy and resentment began to grow with each passing day. It was clear that she resented Kamida for taking up space in the house that was now hers. She had never truly accepted the girl into her life, and the more Kamida tried to prove her worth, the more Basa's disdain grew. What hurt most was the way Basa compared her own children to Kamida. The jealousy was a silent poison, seeping into every conversation, every glance, every word. Basa's frustration was evident in the way she spoke to Kamida, her sharp tone cutting through the air. But it wasn't just words. Basa's cruelty went deeper, and the young girl could feel it in the way she was treated. In a moment of desperation, Basa hatched a plan. She had had enough of Kamida's presence in her life, and she was determined to rid herself of the girl for good. No longer satisfied with mere verbal cruelty, she turned to the village witch, a mysterious and feared figure who was said to possess great power. Basa, her heart heavy with jealousy and resentment, sought the witch's help to cast a curse that would rid her of Kamida once and for all. She needed Kamida out of her life, gone, erased, and she was willing to do anything to achieve that. The witch listened carefully to Basa's request, her eyes dark with ancient knowledge. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice calm but ominous. "Beware, for magic has a way of twisting things. What you seek may bring ruin in ways you cannot foresee." But Basa, consumed by her bitterness and anger, paid no mind to the witch's warning. She wanted to. It was a quiet, peaceful day when Kamida ventured into the forest to gather herbs. The air was cool, the scent of pine mingling with the earthy aroma of damp soil. She had always loved the forest, its quiet serenity offering a refuge from the chaos of her home. Here, amidst the trees and the soft rustling of leaves, she felt at peace, as though the forest itself were embracing her, protecting her from the harshness of the world around her. As she made her way deeper into the forest, her sharp eyes caught sight of something unusual, a small, injured animal, its leg twisted in an unnatural way, struggling to move. The poor creature was trembling, its eyes wide with fear and pain. Without hesitation, Kamida knelt beside it, her heart swelling with sympathy. She had always known the ways of nature, her mother having taught her how to heal the plants and animals around their village. Kamida's hands, though small, were gentle as she reached into her bag for the special plant she always carried, a rare herb known for its healing properties. She carefully applied the herb to the animal's injury, whispering words of comfort as she worked. The creature let out a soft cry of pain but soon seemed to relax under her touch. As the hours passed, the animal's leg began to heal, the swelling reducing as the magical properties of the plant took effect. Kamida stayed by its side, not allowing herself to leave until she saw the creature stand on its own, its movements less wobbly than before. A feeling of warmth spread through her chest, a sense of power that she couldn't explain. The forest too seemed to hum in response to her actions, as if acknowledging her presence in a way it had never done before. The moment the animal was strong enough to walk away, Kamida watched it disappear into the underbrush, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over her. But as the animal disappeared, so too did the strange feeling that had gripped her. She stood there, in the heart of the forest, feeling as though she had unlocked something deep within herself. A hidden connection to the natural world, perhaps. She didn't know, but the experience had stirred something in her, something powerful that she couldn't quite understand. In the days that followed, Kamida continued to spend time in the forest, gathering herbs and observing the plants and animals around her. Every time she touched the earth, the trees, or the creatures, she felt an odd energy, as though the very land itself was responding to her. It was as if the forest had opened up to her in a way it never had before, and she began to wonder if she possessed some kind of ability, some hidden power that allowed her to communicate with the natural world. But she kept this discovery to herself, unsure of what it meant or how to explain it. Back at home, Kamida's life continued to be a struggle. She did the work of the house without complaint, tending to the chores and doing her best to remain unnoticed by her stepmother. But there was a shift in the atmosphere. Salwa, her father, had begun to notice the girl's efforts. One evening, after Kamida had spent the day cleaning and preparing dinner, he placed a hand on her shoulder and praised her for her hard work. For the first time in a long while, his words felt genuine, and Kamida's heart swelled with pride. Her father saw her, truly saw her, and that was enough to make her feel special, even if only for a moment. But for Bassa, this praise was the last straw. Her jealousy, which had been simmering beneath the surface for months, finally boiled over. She had tolerated Kamida's presence in the house only as long as she remained in the background, invisible and obedient. But now that Salwa had noticed her, praised her for her kindness, and acknowledged her contributions, Bassa could no longer contain her bitterness. One evening, in a fit of rage, Bassa confronted Kamida in the kitchen. Her voice was cold and sharp, as she accused the girl of trying to take her place in their home, of trying to win Salwa's favor. Kamida stood quietly, not speaking, as Bassa's words cut through the air like a knife. Salwa, sitting nearby, did not intervene. His gaze flickered briefly to Kamida, but his silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. He had always been weak in the face of Bassa's anger, and tonight was no different. "You are nothing but a servant in my house," Bassa spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You are no longer welcome here. Leave. Go to the forest where you belong and stay there. Perhaps that is the only place where you will be useful." Kamida's heart sank as her stepmother's words echoed in her ears. For a moment, she stood frozen, unsure of how to react. But as she looked at her father, who said nothing, the reality of her situation hit her like a thunderclap. She was truly alone. With a heavy heart, she gathered what little she could carry and left the house, walking out into the night, her footsteps slow but resolute. The forest welcomed her with open arms. As she walked deeper into the woods, Kamida felt a shift inside herself. The forest seemed to come alive around her, the rustling of the leaves and the sounds of distant animals no longer frightening but comforting. It was as though the spirits of the land were guiding her, showing her a path that was meant for her, leading her to something greater than she could have imagined. In the heart of the forest, surrounded by the ancient trees, Kamida realized that this was her new home. And in this place, she would find the strength to heal, to grow, and to discover her true potential. The forest, she now understood, was her sanctuary, her refuge, and in its depths she would uncover a future that no one, not even Bassa, could take away from her. Kamida's footsteps faltered as she ventured deeper into the forest, the trees growing taller and more ancient with each passing step. She could feel the air change around her, thick with the scent of moss and damp earth, and the sounds of the forest seemed to quiet, as though holding its breath in anticipation. The path before her twisted and turned, growing narrower, and soon she found herself in an area she had never visited before. This part of the forest was older, its trees gnarled and covered in thick vines, their trunks wide and their branches reaching toward the sky like ancient skeletal hands. It was here, in this sacred ground, that the village elder had once warned her not to tread. The elder, a wise and mystical figure, had spoken of this place with reverence, saying that only those with pure hearts could approach it without suffering consequences. The forest, he had explained, was not just a collection of trees and wildlife. It was a living entity, ancient and powerful, and it protected its secrets fiercely. Kamida had heard these warnings, but something deep inside her told her that this was where she needed to be. The forest had always been her refuge, but now it felt like her destiny was drawing her into its heart. As she walked, Kamida could sense a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The forest felt alive in a way it never had before, as though the very ground beneath her feet was watching her, testing her. The air grew cooler, and the soft rustling of leaves was replaced by an eerie silence. Then, suddenly, the silence was broken by the sound of faint whispers. Voices carried on the wind, speaking in a language Kamida didn't understand. She stopped, her heart racing, but the whispers grew louder, more distinct. As she looked around, she saw shapes moving through the trees, shadowy figures, half glimpsed through the thick undergrowth. They were not human, not entirely, but creatures of the forest, strange and mystical, with eyes that glowed softly in the dark. Kamida was not afraid. The creatures, though odd, seemed to mean no harm. Some of them hovered near her, their eyes fixed on her with curiosity. Others circled her as if guiding her, their movements fluid and graceful, like wind spirits. It was then that she realized these creatures were not just part of the forest. They were the forest. They were its protectors, its messengers, and they were welcoming her into their world. One creature, smaller than the rest, with translucent wings that shimmered like moonlight, approached her. It circled around her head before landing softly on her shoulder. Kamida could feel a surge of warmth spreading through her, as if the creature's presence was imbuing her with its energy. In that moment, she understood. The forest was communicating with her, acknowledging her connection to it. Her heart swelled with a sense of purpose, and the whispering voices grew clearer, no longer distant but resonating inside her mind. "You are chosen," the voices said, not in words, but in feelings, emotions that flooded her chest like a tidal wave. "You are part of this land, part of the magic that flows through it. The forest has always been with you, and now it will help you find your path." Kamida's mind reeled as the realization struck her like lightning. She had always felt an affinity with nature, a deep connection with the earth, but she had never understood the true depth of it. Now, in this sacred place, it became clear that her destiny was intertwined with the forest. She was not just a girl living on the edge of the village. She was a part of something much greater, something ancient and powerful. But before she could process this new understanding, a voice, old and familiar, echoed in her mind, calling her name. Kamida. Startled, she spun around to find the village elder standing before her, or rather, what appeared to be the elder. The figure was translucent, glowing softly with a light that seemed to emanate from within. His face was peaceful, his eyes kind but filled with the weight of wisdom. He looked not like a man, but like a spirit, a manifestation of the forest itself. "Elder," Kamida whispered, her voice trembling with awe. "Is this real? Are you—" "Yes, child," the elder's voice echoed in her mind, though his lips did not move. "I am but a spirit of the forest, and I have come to guide you." Kamida sank to her knees, overwhelmed by the sight of the elder. She had known him in life, had heard his tales of the forest's magic, but to see him now, in this ethereal form, left her speechless. "Your journey has just begun," the elder continued, his voice gentle, but filled with an unmistakable authority. You have been chosen by the spirits to protect this village, to heal the land and its people. The magic of the forest runs through you, and with it, you can change the course of your destiny. Kamida blinked, trying to process his words. I don't understand, she whispered. How can I help the village? I'm just a girl. The elder smiled, his eyes twinkling with an ancient knowledge. You are no ordinary girl, Kamida. Your connection to the forest is stronger than you know. The spirits have watched you, seen the purity of your heart, and they have chosen you as the guardian of this land. Your strength lies not in your body, but in your spirit. You are the bridge between the human world and the world of the forest. Kamida's mind was a whirl of confusion and disbelief. She had always felt connected to the forest, but she never imagined that she could be its protector, its healer. But Basa, she stammered, recalling the cruel woman who had sent her into the forest. She cursed me. She wants me gone. Will the curse destroy me? The elder's expression darkened, though his voice remained calm. The curse she has placed on you is powerful, but it is not invincible. It was born from her hatred and jealousy, and such darkness cannot stand against the light of your heart. The curse will bring ruin to her, not to you, but only if you embrace your true power, only if you accept your role as the protector of this village. Kamida swallowed hard, her mind racing. Could she really be the one to save the village, to stop Basa's evil plans? Could she wield the magic of the forest to heal the land and protect those she loved? You have the strength within you, Kamida, the elder continued. The spirits will help you, guide you, but only you can break the curse. Only you can embrace your destiny. As the elder's words settled in her heart, a sense of clarity washed over Kamida. The path ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges she couldn't yet understand. But she knew deep within herself that this was her purpose. She was more than just a girl lost in the forest. She was the forest's protector, its guardian, and she would face whatever trials lay ahead with the strength of the land itself. With a newfound resolve, Kamida rose to her feet. The spirits of the forest gathered around her, their presence filling the air with energy and hope. She was ready for the journey that awaited her. She was ready to fight for her future, for the village, and for the forest that had chosen her. Basa paced back and forth in her small, dimly lit room, her mind filled with anger and desperation. The last straw had been Kamida's sudden, unexplainable transformation, her newfound connection to the forest, and the subtle power she seemed to wield. Basa couldn't stand it any longer. She had to get rid of Kamida once and for all. Her jealousy and bitterness had reached their peak. The girl was a threat to everything Basa had worked for, her position in the household, her status in the village, and even her marriage to Salwa, which seemed increasingly fragile with every passing day. Frustrated and desperate, Basa once again sought the witch's help. She went under the cover of night, her heart pounding with both fear and anticipation. The witch, as always, lived in the darkest corner of the village, a place where even the bravest villagers feared to tread. The air around the witch's hut was thick with mystery, and the ground beneath her feet seemed to crackle with dark energy as Basa approached. She had no choice now. The witch was her last hope. The witch, with her grey hair and hollow dark eyes, regarded Basa with a knowing look as the woman entered the hut. "You've returned, but be warned, you seek great power, and power comes with a price," the witch croaked. "I want Kamida gone," Basa spat. "She's cursed me, and I want her erased from this world for good." The witch raised a gnarled finger as if considering the request. "A curse that strong is dangerous, even for one such as you. The cost will be more than you can imagine. Are you sure?" "I don't care. Just make her disappear. Make her suffer as I have," Basa pleaded, her desperation evident in her voice. The witch hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Very well, but remember, magic is not a tool to be wielded lightly. It bends, twists, and sometimes it backfires. What you seek may not come to pass as you intend. Basa, too blinded by her hatred and frustration to heed the warning, nodded eagerly. The witch muttered incantations under her breath, her hands weaving through the air as the room filled with a dark, swirling energy. The curse was set. As Basa left the hut, she felt a strange, unsettling sensation wash over her. The air seemed thicker, and the ground beneath her feet felt heavier, as though the forest itself was responding to the curse. But she didn't care. She was focused on one thing: Kamida's removal from her life. The following days were marked by an unsettling calm. At first, it seemed as if the curse had taken effect. Kamida, who had lived for days on the outskirts of the village, had not returned, and for a brief moment, Basa felt a sense of victory. Her plan was working, but then, the strange occurrences began. It started with the crops. The fields, which had once been lush and thriving, began to wither. No matter how much water was poured on them, the plants turned brown, their leaves curling and shriveling. The once bountiful harvest turned into a desolate wasteland of dry, cracked earth. At first, the villagers thought it was a seasonal change, but soon, other signs of misfortune began to surface. The village's livestock, which had always been healthy and thriving, suddenly fell ill. Cattle and sheep dropped dead without warning, and chickens stopped laying eggs. The villagers were mystified, unable to explain the strange illnesses that plagued their animals. Whispers of bad luck and curses began to spread through the village, and soon, all eyes were on Basa and her family. But the worst was yet to come. Basa herself began to feel ill. It started with a faint dizziness, a strange heaviness in her chest, and a deep, unrelenting fatigue. Within days, she was bedridden, her body burning with fever, and her skin turning pale and blotchy. No matter what the healers did, they couldn't cure her. No medicine could ease her pain, and soon her condition grew worse. As Basa's health deteriorated, Sawa, her husband, grew more concerned. He could no longer ignore the strange occurrences that had befallen their family. The crops, the animals, and now his wife. Sawa had always been a man of logic, but the weight of the misfortunes surrounding him began to erode his skepticism. He turned to the village elders, seeking answers. They too were baffled, but their eyes grew troubled when they heard the details. The whispers of a curse, of Kamida's unexplained connection to the forest, were hard to ignore. The village elder, who had once spoken to Kamida in spirit, took Salwa aside. "Your wife has sought the wrong path," he told him solemnly. "She has invited darkness into her home." Salwa's heart sank. The guilt gnawed at him. He had been too blind to see what was happening, too absorbed in his own struggles to protect his daughter. The weight of his neglect crushed him. But it was not too late. Kamida, having discovered her connection with the forest and its spirits, was unaware of the chaos unfolding in her family's home. Her mind had been focused on healing herself, on understanding her true purpose in life. But as the days passed, the whispers of the forest grew more insistent. The spirits were speaking to her again, this time with a sense of urgency. "You must return," they urged. "Your family needs you." Kamida hesitated. She had been so torn between healing the rift in her family and staying in the forest, where she had found her true strength. She had felt betrayed by her stepmother's cruelty, but the elders' teachings had taught her that healing came from within, from forgiveness and compassion. The spirits knew that now was the time for her to return, not for vengeance, but for healing. With a heavy heart, Kamida made the decision. She could not let her family suffer, no matter the hurt Basa had caused her. The forest had given her the power to heal, and it was time for her to use it. The curse, though destructive, could be reversed. Kamida had to return, not as a victim, but as a savior. She gathered the herbs she needed and began her journey back to the village, her heart heavy with both determination and sorrow. The village, though still suffering, would be healed, just as she would heal the wound in her own heart. When Kamida returned to her home, the sight that greeted her was heartbreaking. Her father, Salwa, looked gaunt and weary, his face etched with guilt and worry. The house was dark, the air thick with the scent of illness. Basa lay on the bed, pale and feverish, her body trembling with the remnants of the curse she had so recklessly unleashed. But Kamida did not flinch. She did not turn away. She walked to her stepmother's side, her heart filled with compassion. She had been wronged, yes, but revenge would not heal the pain. It would only perpetuate it. With a soft, steady breath, Kamida closed her eyes and began to chant softly, the ancient words she had learned from the forest spirits. The air around her shifted, and the room seemed to come alive with energy. Her hands glowed with a soft light as she placed them on Basa's forehead. The warmth of her touch seemed to calm the woman's feverish body, and for the first time in days, Basa relaxed. The curse, which had spiraled out of control, began to break. The crops began to revive, the livestock regained their strength, and Basa's fever slowly subsided. As Kamida continued to heal, a sense of peace settled over the household. Kamida knew that her journey was far from over, but this was a beginning, one of forgiveness, of healing, and of strength. Basa's mistake had led to a series of unfortunate events, but now the cycle could be broken. With her newfound power, Kamida would restore not only the balance in her family, but in the village as a whole. And as she looked toward the future, she knew that her connection to the forest was her true strength, one that no curse could ever take away. Kamida's arrival back in the village was like a breath of fresh air after a long, suffocating drought. The people, who had once whispered in fear of the misfortunes that had plagued them, now looked to her with a sense of awe and hope. Her powers, which had been revealed to her in the depths of the forest, were now a beacon of light in the village's darkest hour. But more than just the power to heal the land, Kamida possessed a deep well of compassion and wisdom that drew others toward her, filling them with a sense of peace and trust. With every step she took, the earth seemed to respond. The crops that had withered under the curse slowly began to bloom again. Green shoots broke through the dry soil, and the once barren fields now flourished under Kamida's touch. She sang songs passed down by her mother, and the trees around her seemed to listen, their branches stretching toward the sky, as if offering their blessing. The villagers watched in disbelief as the transformation unfolded before their eyes. The sickness that had spread through the livestock started to recede. Sheep that had fallen ill stood tall and healthy again, and the cows began to graze peacefully in the fields. Even the air seemed fresher, clearer, as if the curse had lifted and the land could finally breathe again. Kamida didn't stop at just the land. She turned her attention to the sick. The elderly, who had been bedridden for weeks with a mysterious illness, now rose from their beds, their faces flushed with health once more. Mothers who had feared for their children's futures now smiled in relief as their children ran through the streets full of life and energy. It was as though the very essence of the village had been restored, and it was all thanks to Kamida's miraculous gift. As she worked, the village elders gathered around her, their faces filled with reverence. They had long known of the forest's magic, but never had they seen it manifest in such a pure and powerful form. They whispered among themselves, marveling at the girl who had been chosen by the spirits. But it wasn't just the village that needed healing. Kamida's family, broken and torn by Basa's cruelty, was also in desperate need of restoration. Salwa, who had once been so distant, now found himself drawn to his daughter in ways he hadn't before. The pain of his neglect weighed heavily on him, and he could no longer ignore the bond he shared with Kamida. He watched from the edge of their home as Kamida worked tirelessly to heal the village. His heart swelled with pride, but also with guilt. He had failed her when she needed him most. The burden of his inaction was almost too much to bear. He had allowed his new marriage to blind him to the needs of his daughter, and now he feared it was too late to make things right. But Kamida, with her boundless capacity for forgiveness, did not hold the past against him. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a brilliant orange, Salwa approached his daughter. The air was cool and the village was quiet, the only sound being the gentle rustling of the trees. "Kamida," he began, his voice shaking with emotion, I don't know how to apologize for what I've done. I have been a poor father to you. I've failed you, and I regret it every day." Kamida, who had been tending to the last of the fields, paused and looked up at her father. The weight of his words was not lost on her. She knew how much pain he carried, and yet she also understood that the path to healing was not just for the land or for the villagers, but for her family too. "Father," she said softly, her voice full of compassion, "I know you've been struggling, but we are here now, together. I don't want you to carry this burden anymore. We can heal, but only if we forgive." Salwa looked into her eyes, and for the first time in many years, he saw the depth of her strength and grace. She had always been a resilient girl, but now she was more than that. She was the bridge between their broken past and the future they could build together. In that moment, Salwa knew that he had been given a second chance, a chance to be the father Kamida needed, not the man he had been. "I'm sorry," he said again, his voice breaking. "Thank you for forgiving me." Kamida smiled gently, a warmth in her eyes. "There's nothing to forgive. You are my father, and I love you." Basa, who had been watching from the shadows, now found herself in a place she never thought she would be, humbled, ashamed, and remorseful. Her actions had caused so much pain, and now, seeing the way Kamida had restored the village, her own heart ached with regret. The curse that she had once so eagerly cast upon Kamida had come back to haunt her, not just in the misfortune it had caused, but in the realization that she had nearly destroyed the very family she had wanted to control. As Kamida's healing powers continued to work, Basa felt the weight of her past mistakes crashing down on her. She had treated Kamida with cruelty, driven by jealousy and fear, but now, standing in the presence of the girl she had once sought to harm, she saw the error of her ways. For the first time, she truly understood the depth of Kamida's power, not just in magic, but in her heart. One evening, after the sun had set and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Basa approached Kamida. The girl was sitting by the fire, her face illuminated by the soft glow, and Basa felt a pang of guilt strike her heart. She had wronged this girl, this child who had only ever shown kindness, and now she needed to make things right. "Kamida," Basa said, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. I have wronged you. I have been cruel, and I have hurt you in ways I cannot undo, but I am truly sorry. Please forgive me." Kamida looked up at her stepmother, her face calm yet full of understanding. "I forgive you, Basa. I know you were angry, and I know you were afraid, but we cannot live in fear and hate. We can only move forward with love." Basa's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Kamida, finally understanding the depth of the girl's wisdom. She had been blinded by jealousy and ambition, but now she could see the light that Kamida had brought into their home. "I will support you, Kamida," she said, her voice steady. "I will be here for you, and I will help you rebuild what I destroyed." Kamida smiled, her heart swelling with relief. It was not just the land that needed healing, it was the people too. And now, with her father's love, Basa's repentance, and the villagers' trust, Kamida knew that the future held hope, not just for her, but for everyone who had been touched by the miracle of forgiveness and redemption. As time passed, Kamida settled into her new role as the heart and soul of the village. She had grown in strength and wisdom, no longer the shy, quiet girl who had once been pushed aside. With her abilities now fully embraced, she had become a beacon of hope for the people around her. Her presence alone had the power to calm the storms of life and heal the most profound wounds. The village that had once been on the brink of despair now flourished, its crops bountiful, its people healthy, and its spirit restored. Kamida spent her days traveling between the village and the forest, offering her healing to those in need. She worked with the spirits, the same mystical creatures who had once guided her, to bring balance to the land. The village elders, once skeptical, now sought her advice and looked to her for guidance. They had witnessed her growth, and they knew that she was no longer just a girl with a gift. She was the protector of the village, chosen by the spirits themselves. In the quiet moments, Kamida often found herself reflecting on how far she had come. She remembered the days when she had been abandoned, feeling like an invisible presence in her own home, longing for her father's love and her mother's warmth. But those painful days were behind her now. She had not only healed her father's heart, but had also brought Basar back from the depths of her bitterness. The family, once divided, now stood together, bound by love, understanding, and the power of forgiveness. Kamida's relationship with her father, Salwa, had transformed. The guilt that had once weighed heavily on his shoulders was gone, replaced by a deep admiration for his daughter. He was no longer the distant, absorbed man he had once been. Kamida had opened his eyes to the beauty of love and the importance of family. Together they worked side by side, ensuring the village's prosperity and protecting the natural balance that Kamida had become so deeply connected to. Basar, now fully redeemed, was a different woman than the one who had once plotted to rid herself of her stepdaughter. She supported Kamida wholeheartedly, no longer motivated by jealousy or fear, but by a genuine desire to right the wrongs of her past. She had learned the true meaning of love, unconditional, without expectation, and had become an ally to Kamida in every sense of the word. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the village, Kamida found herself standing at the edge of the sacred forest once more. The same forest that had revealed her true purpose, the forest that had tested her and shown her the power that lay dormant within her. It was in this sacred space that she had first felt the stirrings of something greater than herself, and now, as the wind whispered through the trees, Kamida understood that the forest had always been a part of her journey. In that quiet moment as she gazed out over the village she had helped heal, Kamida felt a deep sense of connection to everything around her. The earth beneath her feet, the wind in the trees, the very air she breathed, all of it was a part of her, and she was a part of it. The spirits of the forest, the animals, the plants, they were all connected, bound by the same thread of life. She was not just a girl with a gift. She was the bridge between the living world and the spirit world, the protector of both. A soft voice echoed in her mind, the voice of the village elder, who had once appeared to her as a spirit. "You are the chosen one, Kamida. The forest has called to you, not just for your healing powers, but for your heart. You are destined to protect both the living and the spirits. Your journey is far from over, but now you know your purpose." Kamida nodded, understanding now what she had not fully grasped before. She was not just a healer, she was the guardian of the balance between the natural world and the spiritual realm. It was a sacred duty, one that she had accepted with grace and humility. As the wind rustled the leaves above her, Kamida felt a sense of peace wash over her. She was ready for whatever came next, knowing that the path she had chosen was the right one. Her heart swelled with love for her family, for the village, and for the forest that had taught her so much. She was no longer the girl who had been cast aside. She was a leader, a protector, a healer. And as the first stars began to appear in the sky, Kamida made a silent promise to the forest, to the spirits, and to herself. She would continue her work, guiding her people, protecting the balance and sharing the love and forgiveness that had brought her this far. The story of Kamida's transformation, from a forgotten girl to the protector of her village, spread far beyond the borders of her home. Travelers came from distant lands, seeking her wisdom and healing, and many of them left with their hearts lightened, their spirits uplifted. The legacy of her miracles continued to grow, passed down through generations, until Kamida became a legend. The village, once ravaged by hardship and division, became a place of peace and prosperity. It stood as a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the deep connection between the human world and the spirits of nature. Kamida's name was spoken with reverence, not just as a healer, but as a symbol of hope, strength, and transformation. And as for Kamida herself, she continued to walk the path that had been laid before her, standing at the intersection of the living and the spirit world. The forest, always her guide, would forever be with her, and she would continue to protect it, just as it had protected her. The story of Kamida, the girl with the miracle in her heart, was not just a tale of magic. It was a story of healing, of transformation, and of the power of forgiveness. It was a story of how one girl, with the courage to embrace her destiny, changed the course of her village and the world around her. And as long as the forest stood, her legacy would endure, a beacon of light in a world that was sometimes dark, but always full of hope.